On April 18, 1987, flatbed trucks crossed southern Louisiana before stopping behind Caleb Turner's weathered barn. Their beds rose together. Wet sugarcane fiber thundered down, steaming beneath morning light, spilling across pasture until nearly 400 tons formed a sour, blackening hill. Drivers signed papers, shut doors, then disappeared toward Millhaven Sugar. Neighbors slowed beside fencing, whispering about ruined land, poisoned soil, certain bankruptcy. Turner said nothing. Kneeling, he pulled apart one dripping handful, studied its tough strands, and smiled. Everyone saw rot. This farmer recognized raw material. Subscribe to the channel and tell us where you're watching from, because this forgotten waste is about to become a $1 million brand. By noon, the smell had reached Caleb Turner's kitchen, sharp enough to spoil coffee and turn his boy away from breakfast. He walked outside, boots sinking into the pile's wet edge, while flies gathered over runoff, curling toward the drainage ditch. Millhaven's foreman, Earl Pike, waited beside the mound with a clipboard tucked under one arm. "You said this would be a few loads," Caleb told him. Earl shrugged. "That's what they told me. This is 400 tons. Closer to 380, Earl replied. "It'll dry." Caleb looked at the dark mound pressing against his fence. "And when it doesn't?" The foreman closed his folder. "Then you'll have plenty of compost." No agreement had mentioned dumping. Months earlier, the mill had asked permission to leave several truckloads of bagasse, the crushed fiber left after juice was pulled from cane. Earl called it clean farm material. He promised it would dry quickly, improve poor soil, and save Caleb money on fertilizer. With corn prices falling, a broken baler behind the shed, and 2 bank notices inside his desk, free material sounded useful. The first loads seemed harmless. Pale fiber landed in small heaps that smelled faintly sweet. Caleb spread some beneath cattle bedding and mixed another batch into a garden row. Then trucks started arriving every week. Small heaps became ridges, ridges became walls. Rain soaked the lower layers, heat built inside, and the sweetness turned sour. Neighbors noticed before the mill stopped pretending. "Turner's raising garbage now," one man joked at the feed store. Another asked whether Caleb planned to plant flies. Caleb laughed because anger cost energy, and he had none to spare. Since his wife, Ruth, died 2 winters earlier, every fence repair, loan payment, meal, and school morning rested on him. Selling the farm would clear part of the debt, but it would also erase everything his father had spent 40 years building. That evening, Caleb climbed halfway up the steaming pile. Beneath the rotten crust, his hand found a pocket of dry, springy fiber. He pulled it free. Without another word, he carried it into the barn. Caleb spread the dry fiber across an old workbench beneath a hanging bulb, pulling the strands apart while rain tapped against the tin roof. Bagasse looked useless from a distance, but up close it was tough, light, and packed with trapped air. He remembered how quickly dry cane leaves caught fire after harvest, then wondered whether pressure could turn this waste into something steady enough to burn. Using baling wire, he tied a handful into a tight bundle and placed it inside the cracked wood stove near the tool cabinet. Smoke rolled first, bitter, heavy, yet once the dampness burned away, the center glowed longer than loose kindling. Caleb tried again the next morning. He dried another batch beside the stove, crushed it beneath a tractor jack, and mixed in a spoonful of clay to hold the fibers together. The block broke apart before noon. A second one smoked badly. The third crumbled when he lifted it. Nothing worked cleanly. Still, each failure taught him something. Less water, more pressure, smaller pieces, longer drying. For 2 weeks, he worked after chores while neighbors watched smoke leak from the barn roof. Earl Pike drove past once, slowed, then laughed through his open window. "Trying to burn the evidence, Turner?" Caleb kept tightening the jack. "Trying to understand it." That answer mattered. Most people would have called the county, hired a lawyer, or set the pile on fire. What would you have done with 400 tons rotting behind your barn? Tell us below, and subscribe if you enjoy stories about ordinary people who refuse to stay buried under somebody else's mistake. By the end of April, Caleb had shaped a dense brown brick that held together in both hands. He placed it in the stove, shut the iron door, and waited. 1 hour passed, then another, and heat still filled the barn. This was different. Caleb opened his notebook, wrote 3 words across the top of a clean page, and underlined them twice. Cane fuel blocks. Under the weak bulb, the words looked foolish, but Caleb kept staring at them. A block that burned was not yet a product. It had to light without choking a room, survive transport, and cost less than firewood. Otherwise, it was another experiment gathering dust. He began with what he had: a hydraulic jack, scrap steel from a broken plow, and 2 lengths of pipe. By Sunday, he had built a crude press against the barn wall. It groaned whenever he pulled the handle, squeezing damp fiber into rough cylinders that looked more like feed cakes than fuel. His first batch dried crooked. Several pieces split down the middle, while others grew mold along the base. Caleb adjusted everything. He chopped the bagasse finer with a borrowed forage cutter, reduced the water, and lined wooden trays with chicken wire so air could reach underneath. A retired mechanic named Walter Dean noticed the setup while delivering a repaired pulley. "What are those supposed to be?" Walter asked. "Heat," Caleb said. Walter picked one up. "Feels like trouble." "Most useful things do at first." The older man stayed until sunset, helping strengthen the press and add a release lever. Within a week, Caleb could shape 20 blocks an hour. Making them was one problem. Proving them was another. He gave samples to a welding shop, a roadside smokehouse, and Mrs. Landry, who heated her greenhouse with an iron stove. The welder said they burned evenly. The smokehouse owner liked the low sparks. Mrs. Landry complained that 2 blocks crumbled in transit. Caleb thanked every person, especially those who criticized him. He thickened the binding mix with starch, wrapped each bundle in paper, and stamped Turner Cane Fuel across the front using a hand-cut wooden mark. The name was plain, and so was the promise beneath it: local, clean, dependable. By early December, 50 bundles stood stacked inside the barn, dry, firm, and ready. That afternoon, Mrs. Landry arrived in a hurry. "Caleb," she said, breathless, "how many of these can you make before tomorrow night?" A hard, cold front had dropped out of Arkansas, pushing rain south and sending nighttime temperatures toward freezing. Mrs. Landry's fuel supplier had missed his delivery, and 12,000 tomato seedlings sat beneath greenhouse glass, with enough wood for one more night. Caleb looked at the 50 bundles stacked inside his barn. "All of them," he said. Walter helped load the truck while Caleb carried blocks from the drying racks. By dusk, they had packed every bundle, then returned for the crooked pieces Caleb had rejected. Nothing else was available. Inside the greenhouse, 3 iron stoves glowed weakly. Caleb fed cane blocks into each fire, watched the edges catch, and waited for smoke. Very little came, and the heat spread slowly before holding steady. Outside, frost silvered the grass. Wind rattled panes. Through midnight, Caleb and Mrs. Landry moved between rows, checking thermometers and adding fuel. One stove dropped near dawn, but a broken block brought it back before the plants chilled. Sunrise revealed every seedling standing upright. Mrs. Landry pressed both hands over her mouth. "You saved the crop." Her words traveled farther than any advertisement Caleb could have bought. Within days, 2 poultry growers asked for samples. A repair shop ordered 20 bundles. 3 greenhouse owners wanted winter contracts. People no longer asked whether cane waste could burn. They wanted to know when Caleb could deliver. The greatest move came next. Millhaven paid trucks to haul bagasse away. Caleb offered a better deal. Dump clean fiber on a drying pad, follow his schedule, and sign over the material at no charge. The mill avoided disposal costs. He gained a steady supply nobody else controlled. Earl read the agreement twice. "You're asking us to give you the waste?" Caleb leaned back. "I'm saving you from paying to lose it." For once, Earl didn't laugh. Earl signed. By the following winter, the rotting hill behind Caleb's barn was shrinking, while orders for Turner cane fuel rose faster than he could press them. Caleb moved production into an abandoned cotton warehouse, where Walter installed 2 rebuilt hydraulic presses and a drying system made from old tobacco fans. The first workers were people Caleb knew: a laid-off mill hand, a widowed bookkeeper, and 2 brothers whose cattle farm had failed during drought. Nobody wore polished shoes, and everyone understood hard seasons. Caleb paid fair wages, taught each person to judge moisture by touch, and refused to ship blocks that cracked under pressure. Customers could forgive plain packaging. They would not forgive cold barns. Orders spread beyond Lynn Parish. Feed stores stocked the bundles beside firewood. Greenhouses placed monthly contracts. Poultry growers used them during damp winters, while repair shops praised the steady heat and low sparks. Caleb replaced the paper wrapping with recycled sacks, added lighting instructions, and shortened the name to Turner Fuel. At last, the brand looked as dependable as the product. Millhaven's managers began mentioning the partnership at county meetings, carefully leaving out the months when they had ignored Caleb's complaints. Earl even posed beside a delivery truck for the newspaper. Caleb never corrected the story. Quiet vindication did not need an argument. 3 years after the first loads arrived, Turner Fuel employed 27 people and shipped across 4 states. Annual sales passed $1 million, yet Caleb still walked the drying floor each morning, breaking open random blocks and checking their centers. One Friday, he returned to the patch behind his barn. Grass had begun covering the stained ground. No flies rose, no sour water entered the ditch. Only a small ridge of pale fiber remained beneath the fence. His son stood beside him and asked, "Do you ever wish they hadn't dumped it here?" Caleb looked toward the warehouse where loaded trucks waited beneath the evening sun. "No," he said. "I just wish I'd known sooner what they were giving away." At last, the final truck pulled onto the road. What began as 400 tons of rot became heat, jobs, and $1 million brand because Caleb saw value before anyone else did. Sometimes opportunity arrives smelling like failure. Subscribe for more stories of rural courage, useful ideas, earned success, and quiet vindication.